Buddhism, the number 3 is always there. And we used to have high school students that would come and visit us. Sometimes college students would come and visit us with their teacher in Long Beach. And one of the questions that came up very frequently is, well, I see 3 here. The kids were tuned in to the symbology, well, there's 3 in this. And I said, well, yeah. They said, well, why is that? And they said, well, because probably it's because we have the 3 treasures, which are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And so you see this 3 happen. Years later, when I was studying with my Vietnamese teacher, he made a remark one time that it's good teaching technique that you repeat yourself. And within Buddhism, I saw this all the time, and when I became a professional teacher, I started doing pretty much the same thing. They used to say, I got criticized one time when a principal came in and watched my class, because I was told, well, see, the form goes like this. If you're going to give a teaching lecture, you tell people what you're going to talk about. Well, today I'm going to talk about being right. And then you talk about being right. And then at the end, you can recapitulate by telling them, see, I talked to you about being right, and maybe giving a short list. And so within that talk, no matter how long it is, you've done it 3 times. It's not a bad idea. And so, and this came up one time with Thich Thien because somebody said, well, Pseudo, you've already talked to us about that, or Pseudo, we've heard that before, or something. And he said, well, you need to really say it 3 times for people to retain it. So, this is my excuse for giving you a talk that I've already given you. Pretty tricky, am I not? We're attempting to do something which is in its fledgling stages. My teacher had a book which we try to have here for you to buy. We just buy it from Amazon and charge you what Amazon charges us. We don't typically make any money off of something like that. That's not our intent. It's called Zen Practice and Philosophy. And in that book, the chapters are talks that Thien gave. And he had a once-a-week class in the evening. And I've mentioned this many times before, and he would give a half-hour talk. He'd go in and you'd do half an hour meditation in the Zendo. He would then give a half-hour talk, and people could interrupt him, they could go, whoa, but they usually didn't. And then we'd get up and stretch our legs, and then we'd have another half an hour meditation, and he would ask us at the end of that, he said, what would you like me to talk about next week? Well, I've tried that here, and it's a total failure. Because if I ask you, what would you like me to talk about next Sunday? Nobody responds. Oh, you do such a nice job of giving talks, you can figure it out yourself, And I thought he was so crafty because he walked out of there with a week to kind of cook it in his head, what he was going to talk about. And it was only going to be half an hour. And same thing on Sunday service. Our Sunday service is patterned after what happened down in Los Angeles at my teacher's temple. We did meditation, we had a talk, and then we did a little bit of chanting. I did not invent that. So that's one person. And then there's a very well-known book by people that practice Zen, at least people in the past, called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And it's an excellent book to read if you have a meditation practice. It is not a good book to read if you're just coming to Buddhism. This is a new experience. You're going to have no idea what he's talking about. You really need, I think, to meditate for a couple of years, and then you can read this book, because then you'll know exactly what he's talking about. It's not complicated or anything like that. It's just that if I wanted to talk to you about sailing, wouldn't I be kind of smart if I took you on a sailing boat a few times And then we sat down and talked about how to tack and what you got to watch out for and all that kind of thing. So there was a wonderful lady that was a volunteer secretary for him, and she was usually around the center in the afternoons. And her and another person, who I don't know who it was, but I know that Katie, there were two of them working, and Katie took and transcribed these talks. They recorded them. 1 year they recorded all these talks. And then it turned into Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which if you look at it, you go, oh, but it's a great book, because one little chapter, none of them are long, because it took half an hour to talk and then it got cleaned up. And there's one on mindfulness, and there's one on reincarnation or rebirth. There's one on karma, and it goes, and what was unique about it was that, because he wasn't doing this when I went to his class, every week he would do a different meditation. So in the book, he says, okay, now for the meditation we're going to do at the end of this chapter, we're going to do walking meditation. And we're going to do it in the style of so-and-so. So we got the idea here. We have a Steve, everybody. The gentleman sitting right there in the back, his name's Steve. Steve is a phenomenon. He's a phenomenon to me because years ago I met a man in Los Angeles at a ceremony who turned out to live right here in Lucerne Valley, and his name was Steve. And he looked exactly like that guy. And he began coming here on a regular basis. He helped out with a variety of things. He was an engineer at one of the mines we have in this town. And then he started going down the hill, and the next thing I know, he's got a girlfriend. And the next thing I know, I get a call, and he wants me to perform a marriage ceremony for he and his wife, now that he has Angel. And we did that. I'm sorry I did that because I never saw him again. I guess he was just too doggone happy at home with his wife, and so there was no reason to come by here anymore. He didn't get lonely for me because he had Angel. He suggested at the time that maybe we could, because we started recording these talks, and it was his idea to record these talks. And we had a different setup. They were just audio. This one we got a video. It goes on YouTube. We're in big time. But in the beginning it was audio talks. They were all on the website. They weren't huge. You could download them real easy. I have one student up in San Francisco. He downloaded like 10 or 15 talks on one of the little thumb drive things, gets in his car to drive down here to visit his family, and listens to my talks, his favorite talks. I found that very interesting. He took me out to lunch one time when he came down to visit his family, got in his car, and here's me talking. I go, what is that? He said, oh, these are my favorite talks that you've given. So he and a couple other people had this idea that never went anywhere, was why don't we take these talks, transcribe them, and make a book, just like Thien and just like Suzuki Roshi had, and we'll use the talks. Well, there's a program that you can buy for your computer that you can talk into your computer, and it's called Dragon Speak, and I bought it. And I bought it because I have a friend that's been telling me how to write a book for a few years. And I thought, well, I like to talk, and it's a lot easier. I can type. I took typing in 9th grade, so I can do that. But, you know, I just flow. I just I'll get a couple cardboard cutouts of people, and I'll talk to them, and everything will just flow. Well, I thought, why don't I take some of these talks like that we can get on YouTube. I'll put YouTube on one computer. I bought a new laptop because my old laptop would not take Dragon Speak. I mean, it's 14 years old. It wouldn't take a lot of stuff. So I had to buy, because I thought, this is a project I'm going to do. And this last week I got on there, I pulled a talk called Being Right. the one you're going to get today, and if I ever get to it. And I turned that on, and I turned on the Dragon Speak, and recorded it, and it printed it all out, and then I took it and tried to make sense of it. And I realized that 2/3 of what I'd said had nothing to do with being right. So these were vignettes rather than an actual essay. And we were down now maybe to a 10-minute talk. Well, maybe that would work. And I thought, boy, this is really laborious. Maybe it would just be easier if I just started off and went ahead and just gave the talk. And I thought about all the people that had given talks that were turned into books. And of course, we know the famous Vietnamese book, Monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who as far as I've been able to figure out, has written 3 books in his whole life. And he's got almost 200 of them out there. They're all him talking. And all his disciples, they're all got recording machines, and they all type them out, and they, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And then he's just, you know, he's got a book mill going on. But that's what he's basically doing. But he's done some books, you know, White Cloud's New Path. I never say that right, I always get it backwards. It's a wonderful book that he wrote. Everybody that's interested in Buddhism should read White Cloud New Path. A little pricey. It's a big book. You could hold a door open with this book. But it's got nice chapters in there about the life of the Buddha, all the way up to his death. I recommend it. Wonderful book. Zen Keys was the first book that I ever read that he actually wrote. And it's a good introduction to Vietnamese Zen, or Thien, the practice. But the rest of them are him talking. There's not a thing wrong with him. He's a good talker. But I thought maybe I could do this and become famous like him. You know, and then I could have a center in France. I'd like to go to France so that people could make fun of me because I don't speak French and never will. Being right. I want you to think, have you ever made a statement that you didn't think you were right when you made it? Now, this is just human nature we're talking about here. And if you did make a statement, now I'm a kidder myself. He asked me on the phone, he lives down in Costa Mesa, by Costa Mesa, and he asked me on the phone because we had a retreat yesterday, which was very successful, I thought. And he said, well, can I stay over in one of the cabins? Because we've got 4 cabins over here, and that's what their purpose is for people to stay in them when they come here. And sometimes people even will do personal retreats. I gotta know you. Don't start writing me letters saying you want to come. Oh, I could do that. That would be cheap. Because we don't charge anything here for anything. And no, we've got to know you. Steve is living with us now. Steve number 2, I call him. And so he said, can I stay? And I said no, because I've got this sort of semi-sarcastic sense of humor. Anybody going to challenge me on the semi? And I said, no, I'm just kidding. Of course you can stay. I don't even know why I said that. I also had lots of senior moments. So if you watch the videos, we got a ton of them up there now. You'll see me go, where was I? And if I have the right people in the audience, Susan or Mary, will put me right back on track, because they were, boom, and I'm back where I was going. Being right. Unless you were kidding around, why would you say anything that you didn't think was right? Now, we live in what I think, you know, I was a geology major in the beginning in college, and we had the Cretaceous. We're going to give this period we're in right now, sociologists are going to give it a name. They have to. I'm not sure what they're going to call it. They may call it the age of everybody argued. No, what did something popped in my mind, Cretaceous, audacious. There'll be a name that comes up that implies that everybody is arguing with everybody else. And I think of that old rock and roll song, Nobody's Right, everybody's wrong. And here we are, if I say the word Democrat, I've got to duck. Not much up here though, because we live, California, well, this area here is very, very redneck that we're in. So we have some Republicans that live here. And if I walk into the store and I say, I want to see a Democrat, people will start throwing canned peas at me because they're Republicans. But if I go to any place else in California, if I say Republican, oh, they carry rocks now and bricks and things to throw because we just absolutely never are going to be able to get along again. Now, we've had periods of time where people could get along, couldn't get along, okay, yeah, but we weren't always so nasty about it. And it's because both sides think they're right. Because why wouldn't they think they're right? If you're a Democrat, whatever that means today, I know what it meant when I was a kid. It doesn't mean that today. Neither does being a Republican mean what it used to mean. I don't know what either one of them really mean to anybody today. But if you're a Democrat because you believe all of that is right. And when you talk, I have a friend, he's probably the closest civilian non-monk friend that I have, retired college administrator, who is a Democrat, and he will tell me everything that's wrong with Republicans. And before the pandemic, we'd go out to dinner once a week. And, you know, we're both retired from education. He actually taught for a while before he became an administrator. And I have to think that maybe he was a decent teacher, although usually people become administrators because they don't like teaching. That's just my personal opinion on that. I must be right, right? But he'll tell me everything that's wrong. And of course, we go to lunch with a bunch of retired people from our local college. Once, we call it the Old Guys Club. And I'm young. I'm one of the young ones in this group. And these are people that have been movers and shakers in the community. And every one of them is a Republican. And they go after my friend Jeff every month when we have lunch together. And we have one of those lunches where you eat your lunch and then you sit around and talk and solve the problems of the world. And it's really fascinating because I observe the human condition. And a good Buddhist monk, and understand when I say monk, I use monk for men and women. I am a non-discriminatory type guy here in Buddhism, and everyone that is a monk should be just looking at the human condition, because you can understand yourself by understanding other people. And if you understand yourself, then you can understand other people. It goes both ways. And so we go in there, and these Republicans, I have to tell you, by the way, I'm giving a slightly different talk than the other one. So yeah, you can count this as an almost new talk because of what's going on right now. And they are deathly afraid. They're not pretending. They are afraid like the end of the world, afraid that if Joe Biden and Kamala get elected, it is the end of time as we know it. Okay? And when I look at them, I can see their vision that this country is literally going to collapse. And these are all intelligent, educated men, which means they should be right, right? Now my friend Jeff, he's got a couple college degrees. He's never taught high school like I did. He's always taught college. He was vice president of Victor Valley College here. He's been a dean in other colleges. You would think he was intelligent, right? And he believes that if Trump is in another term, this country will literally collapse. That it is the end time, that the Christians are right. This will be the time when blood will flow in rivers and bones will burn for 7 years. And that when we get done, we will be back in the caves. We'll be cavemen living in caves with animal skins, out collecting roots and berries and things, because it will be the end of all time. And he believes beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's right. Do you see a problem here? Yeah, and I started off by saying, why would you say something if you didn't think it was right? Is anybody ever wrong? Well, a mathematician would say, yes, if there's two people, one has to be wrong. Well, first of all, in Buddhism, we know that's nonsense. We know that two people can be right and think each other is wrong. And this is perception. We're going to do a chant at the end of the service today. Most of you are familiar with this chant. You may not have had time to think about it because you've joined us as we're chanting and you're reading it. And really when you're chanting, the intention is not to think about it. It's just to do it. It's a mindfulness exercise. But I'll be honest with you that I've been doing this practice for, I have to stop and subtract, 50 years. I've been doing this practice for 50 years. And when we're chanting the Heart Sutra, there are times when I have epiphanies. Because the Heart Sutra is a condensed version of a sutra in 8,000 lines that was written in China. And the lines are calligraphy lines. And a friend of mine who's an incredible linguist, who speaks Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, you name it. And he has told me that if you take and you translate one line of Chinese figures, you come up with basically 3 times as much in English writing. This is huge. The sutra itself, when it's translated into English, is about that thick. And we take it and condense it into 1 page. So that means that there's a lot of meat in that thing, but you're not going to pick up on it immediately. You've got to keep seeing it over and over again, and it's still happening to me. I'll be going along and boom, I understand. See, and what's really exciting about it is I used to think I understood. I've given workshops on the Heart Sutra probably 6 times down in LA over the years. People come in for a Saturday like we were yesterday. I'd be, do a little meditation, I'll tell you what it means, do a little more meditation, take a break. And then I find out I was wrong because I just had an epiphany again and I understand what's going on in this thing. So are there levels of truth? Probably. But we get so tied into our particular understanding of truth at the moment that we're willing to get in a physical fight about it. It's going on right now in this country. People are hurting each other because they've bought into their particular version of truth at that moment in their life. And they're so emotional about it. This is an emotional time. We haven't had a pandemic in 100 years. We have had them all through history. I mentioned that yesterday. Almost everybody from the retreat is here. So, but no, we've had them. They've been going on for a long time. This is not a new occurrence. This is just new for us. My grandmother lived through the one in 1918 and told me that back then, when I heard about it, I asked her that every family, her perception now, every family had a death in it. Think about that. Every family was touched by death during the flu epidemic that began in 1918 and went to 1919. Can you imagine how scary that was? We've got medicine. We've got all kinds of things. We know that if we try hard enough, within time we'll have a vaccine. It's not a question of will we have it. We're an incredibly talented species. It's just, you got to give us some time to do this. We didn't know it was coming. We'd never seen it before. The batteries went bad on this. So, does that mean the batteries are good? See, I got a red light. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Or am I just talking loud today? My oxygen level is high today. So I got it set on 3. Yeah. So we got a red light here, and we didn't know what that meant. And then the red light started flashing. So we'll see how long that lasts. So let's make this personal. And I don't think it really works that every time you make a statement that you have to do self-examination. Nobody would ever talk, right? Yeah, it's like that. I went to a Catholic school one year, and we never wrote homework. Okay, I had a stepfather who was Catholic. That's how I ended up in a Catholic school. And we had nuns. And we would go home with their homework every night, and I can remember the first week or two crying every night because I was afraid of those nuns. And I had good reason to be afraid of that nun. And we would go in the next day, and nothing, math problems, nothing was written down. I mean, I could write it down at home, but I didn't go in and, she never graded any homework. Matter of fact, she had a pretty good program. Think about this, if you've ever been a teacher or thought about, you know, your schoolwork. She never had to grade homework because she would start in seat number 1, and she would say the kid's name. Bobby, would you stand? You always stood. Yes, sister. Bobby, name the Great Lakes. I learned about that end of the country because we were in New York. And Bobby would rattle off the Great Lakes. As the sister looked at him, and you know what she's got in her hand, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
And if Bobby didn't know the Great Lakes, whap! Then Mikey would stand up. Mikey, what's 42 plus 67? And you bet it better roll off the lips. Okay? So you know that self-examination was going on in there. But think, how could you have a conversation with a friend, particularly somebody you really knew and you really liked, and you're just talking as fast as you can, and you're going like this, and you say something stupid. And the minute you say it, you realize you said something stupid. What do you do about that? Well, you just keep going. I thought today about what I was going to talk about. This is always a challenge for me because I've been doing it too many years. I keep waiting for these guys to take over. We got one back over there too. You get to hear him next week if he shows up. See that one back in there, hiding around the corner? Yeah. And if you're nice to him, if you know Spanish, he'll give it English, then Spanish, then English. He has a radio show. If you want to hear some good music, talk to him about the radio show. I didn't listen to it because it was all in Spanish. He's now started translating it. I found that out this morning, that he talks in Spanish and he translates it because he found out that gringos were listening to his radio show because he has good music on it. What do you do when you realize that you made a mistake? Well, when I was thinking today, what am I going to talk about? I started off with something completely different in my head. And then I thought, well, you know, I listened to that and I probably should restate that. There's a poster that I saw, I don't have it, and it's got John Wayne. You know, John Wayne is an incredible character for many reasons. The Marines idolized John Wayne. because he played in movies where he was a Marine. Now, you know Jimmy Stewart retired from the Air Force Reserve as a general? There were many movie stars during World War II that went out and enlisted and didn't worry about their careers. Didn't even think about their careers, just went out and enlisted. Jimmy Stewart enlisted at the beginning of World War II after Pearl Harbor. Came home a colonel with a lot of bombing flights. He was a pilot in a bomber and stayed in the reserves and refused to wear his uniform to any functions. I admire him very much. Any functions, take advantage of his rank or his history. John Wayne made wonderful movies, didn't he? You know, I remember the one where he had the axe handle and he looked at the bad guy and he said something like, well, I was going to hit you, but I don't think I will. I don't think I will. The hell I won't. Whap! Hits this guy with an axe handle. So they picked John Wayne. There was a movie made of a book that was written called Green Beret. And it was about our special forces that John Kennedy, originally thought that we needed to take care of American interest in the world. And so a book was written. I won't go into that. It's kind of interesting. It's not the easiest read in the world, but it's still interesting. But so they made this movie, and John Wayne is playing the officer in charge of an A-team out on a hill in the middle of Vietnam jungle, and there's nobody around. And he has a famous quote that they put on the poster. It says, "Never apologize. It shows weakness." Now, see this lady over here? Now see that guy right there? They're married. They're having a bad time this morning. And I know this because of the amount of distance between the two of them.
He's having hot flashes. He said the air's over there more cool. I go, no, but I like to see the air.
Ah, I see.
But no, we do.
That's what he told you. Huh?
Yeah. Oh.
So, you know, I tell people one of my favorite things to do is a marriage. I love marriages. And the only thing that's better than that is blessing children, which we hardly ever do here, but you know, we did that this last year. I had a couple babies in here. They were walking babies, but I always tell married couples, and this is my advice to everybody in life, is that if you give 100% to the marriage, and he gives 100% to the marriage, it'll work. If you think this nonsense about it's a 50-50 deal, it'll fail. Just look at what the statistics, they've been going on forever now. The number of divorces every year, you know, it's like a revolving door. And that's because people think they need to have their fair share. Okay, you got that, so I should get this. If you approach the marriage from the standpoint of I will do everything I can to make you happy. Now, I know that Gloria Steinem would say to me, wait a minute, that's the way you've always treated women. And I'd say, but Gloria, the guy's got to do the same thing. He's got to do everything in his power to make his wife happy. And if that is the way you approach it, it's going to work. Otherwise, you're in trouble. It's just that simple. You're going to be in trouble. Well, you know what? Life is exactly the same. If these guys up in Congress would get off of their attitude and talk to each other